Why did I add this camera to my kit? The Sony a7C Mark II. My main workhorse for cinematography work is the Sony FX6. That is literally what I'm using right now to film this talking head. We actually did use this as our B-cam slash gimbal camera this past weekend for a little pilot. So it has been put immediately to work. I can also use it to scan my film. Here's some samples of some 35mm film scanned with this camera. If you want to see my DIY setup for at-home film scanning, go check out my other photography-based channel, a new street photography channel that I started at The Freeway Life, both on Instagram and YouTube. And I already shared some sneak peeks of developing my own black and white film, as well as my DIY scanner with this new setup, the a7C Mark II. But also, this has become my new go-to webcam for my live streams that I've been doing here on the YouTube as well. It's very simple. It has a audio jack in right here, so I run stereo out of my sound devices Mix Pre 3, run that in for good audio from my Sennheiser MKH416. And then right next to the audio in port is a USB-C port. I can run a cable from there into my MacBook Pro, and now I'm all good to go for the live streams that I've been doing here. So those are some very good top 3 reasons where this camera has been put to work immediately, but also why most people love this camera is it really is the most ideal, perfect, hybrid travel camera. I was tempted there to say EDC, everyday carry, but that would be a lie for me because my true EDC is another little Sony camera, the RX1 Mark VII. I've done a massive video on this. It has gone insanely popular. I'll leave a link to that down below if you want to check out a true everyday carry pocket camera. This thing is insane. It's basically like a pocket-sized A9. So that is really my true everyday carry camera. However, this thing is still pretty compact compared to some of its other competitors, which we will get into here shortly. So the way I've broken down this video is I'm going to talk about the pros first, and then I'm going to talk about some of the cons. Now, I've only had this camera for a month, and that's what I like to do here. I'll usually report on a camera after the first 30 days, and then I won't talk about it again until I've been using it for a full solid year. My last video of that kind of nature was my 1-year review of the Leica M10. So that's what I'm coming off of. I've replaced my M10 with this a7C Mark II, and if that sounds crazy to Leica fanboys out there, please go check out my 1-year review of the Leica M10. I'll link it down below as well. I prefer the Leica rangefinder for analog photography, not so much for digital photography. The M10, pretty much all the digital Leica M cameras are just one-trick ponies, where this thing can really do a lot of things. But before we get into it, I gotta give a shout out to this video sponsor, and that is Skillshare. Skillshare is the #1 place to be for creatives. They have special curated classes for both photographers, cinematographers, and filmmakers. Special curated playlists for creators by creators, including one of my favorites, the Cinematography Intro to Studio Lighting with one of the GOATs, Matt Workman. The content found on Skillshare caters to all levels, helping members grow from beginner to advanced very quickly. Members can share projects and even get community feedback. Classes are on demand with stackable lessons for flexible learning. And right now, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So join the fun today. Many thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring the show. Now let's get into some of my favorite features of the a7C Mark II. The first one's pretty obvious, the autofocus, right? I've said this multiple times, Sony is the industry leaders when it comes to video autofocus. I've had a lot of comments and DMs where Canon fanboys hate to hear that. Even Nikon fanboys, or should I say Nikon fanboys, hate to hear that. It's like, okay, they're either in denial, or I think the real reality is they haven't actually spent a lot of time shooting with Sony cameras, because any Sony group that I have been in on the Facebook groups, there's a lot of people in there that come from other camera systems, and they admit that they are blown away by the autofocus capabilities of their new Sony camera. So the proof is in the pudding. I have shot on really high-end Canon cameras with some of their most expensive autofocus glass. Nothing compares to the autofocus capabilities on any of the Sony cameras that I've ever used. used? The FX6, the A7S III, the FX30, the FX3, this A7C Mark II, even this little RX100 Mark VII, even the really old 2015 RX1 R Mark II, which I've also done a huge one-year review on. I'll leave that down below as well because we will make some direct comparisons of this to the RX1 R2. But yes, guys, the autofocus of Sony cameras blows all other cameras out of the water. I will stand true to that. If you don't believe that, then you probably don't know how to program the camera to use it to its best capabilities. Now, how much does that matter for cinematography world? I guess it matters more when I'm doing one-man band stuff all by myself. It matters a lot, right? Now, I don't have a whole lot of photo references to share with you. I haven't had an opportunity to shoot real street with this camera yet in terms of stills because the weather's either been off or the reality of I just have not been able to get around to it because I have been luckily a little busy with cinematography work lately. So there's not going to be a lot of awesome stills examples in this video, but I will try my best to share what I can. I am excited to use this for street photography with a native E-mount lens. I'm really ready to go hog wild with that because it's been a while since I've used an autofocus camera for street, basically since my RX1 R2 days. And so yeah, so that means that I haven't really used autofocus for street for over a year. I'm excited to get back using that for that. That'll be fun, especially shooting it side by side with my Leica M3, shooting 35mm film side by side with this. Okay, what are some quick pros that you already know about? Well, we know that it has S&Q mode. It can do 4K 60p. We'll talk about the cons of that later on in the cons section, but yes, you can do true 422 10-bit with S-Log3, sgamut3.cine. You can import LUTs into this thing, which not even my A7S III could import LUTs on the log footage, so that's pretty awesome. This thing has some of the most amazing new features of Sony cameras, such as their skin softening effect. I will admit I have recently used it for the first time in my last live stream, so yeah, it's just kind of like a built-in softening filter. It's kind of, I guess it's okay. There's also the auto reframing, which comes in handy. So there's all these kind of new technologies put into these cameras. And of course, the compactness, right? This thing is super, super compact compared to a lot of other hybrid cameras, especially when you think about the capabilities of this thing, not only in the video realm, but also the photography realm. This thing is a solid replacement for the RX1 R Mark II. Now, I know because I used that camera for over a year. I talked about that. Again, I'll leave a link to that one-year review down below. The biggest flaw of the RX1 R2, in my opinion, is the fact that it is from 2015, and therefore it has the old, ugly Sony color science. You all know what I'm talking about. Sony really have come a long way since then. We have S-Cinetone, which this camera has. Amazing, amazing. I love that this camera has S-Cinetone. And yeah, it just kind of blows the RX1 R2 out of the water, other than the fact that the biggest bonus of the RX1 R2 is that Zeiss 35 f2 sonar lens that was designed specifically for that RX1R sensor. It has a leaf shutter, so I've talked about the bonuses of that. But other than that, I think this is a solid replacement, especially considering the amazing video capabilities you get with this. So yes, solid replacement for the RX1 R2. This is also, I think, a stronger investment than something like a Leica Q3. Now notice I said stronger and not smarter, because in my opinion, being someone that has owned multiple Leica cameras, I had the M8, I had the M6, I had the M10, now I currently have the M3. I was able to sell all of those Leica cameras for more money than what I paid for them. So Leica really is a solid, smart investment within our camera industry. Certainly the analog cameras go up in value over time. The digital Leica cameras, eventually they're going to turn into paperweights. If you do it smart, you can flip a solid investment with Leica cameras. You're not going to be able to do that with Sony cameras. You're probably never going to get what you paid for with any Sony camera when you go to resell it. It's just the reality of it. But I do think it is a stronger investment over a Leica Q3 because of the more capabilities that you get out of this camera. In my opinion, the Leica Q3 is still a one-trick pony. Not as bad as a Leica M10 because the Leica M10 literally has no video capabilities, but the Leica Q3, you know, we know it has issues with overheating. It's not really optimized for video, even though what is it doing, like 8K video or something ridiculous like that. I still find it humorous that camera companies want to lean on the higher resolution, the higher Ks, rather than figuring out how to just get the most out of 4K with their little cameras, you know, but that could be another discussion for another day, maybe on a future live stream or something like that. I don't care. I don't care about Ks. Look, can it do 4K? Great, because that's where most of our stuff is sitting nowadays. I mean, it hasn't been that long that Arri finally switched over to 4K, right? And they're the industry leaders when it comes to movie making. Okay, so it is okay. It is what it is. This thing has way far better video capabilities than a Leica Q3 could ever dream of having. And so, not to mention the interchangeable lenses. We all know that Sony cameras are more about function than the aesthetic appeal. The A7C, all of them, even the Mark I, they have the newer batteries. These are really nice. They last longer than the older Sony batteries. Speaking to that, this one has a little doggy door in the battery door that is perfect for a dummy battery. Picture profiles, we kind of already jumped on that, but I love that this thing has S-Log3, S-Log3, S-Gamut 3.Cine. Can get very close to matching my FX6. Like I said before, you have S-Cinetone, but beyond that, you have full customization within these newer picture profiles where you can create your own Sony film simulations. I've done a whole video on that. I'll link that down below as well. So lots of amazing customization for picture profiles in here. One of the bonuses of the A7C Mark II is we have 3 blank dials on here. So I've done this top one as my ISO just because I got kind of used to that with the M10. This up here in front obviously is my shutter, and then the wheel in the back is my exposure comp if I'm shooting in something like shutter priority mode. And we have this awesome little switch on the top where we can go from either stills mode, video mode, or S&Q mode. So those are kind of nice little bonuses. You know, at least the top part of the camera, they're trying to keep it as minimalist as possible. However, on the back, you know, we still got quite a bit of buttons going on back here. It's not as sleek and sexy as a Leica camera, but you're going to use all of them. And then the last pro I want to tap into is the EVF, because in my 1-year review of the RX1 R Mark II, I threw a lot of shade at the EVF of these A7C cameras, and I saved this pro for last because this will be a perfect segue into the cons. This EVF is actually a lot better than what I thought it was going to be or what I was anticipating, because look, the specs of this EVF are very close to something like the RX1 R2, and they're even very close to what's inside this RX100 Mark VII, because it does have the pop-out EVF, much like the RX1s. However, I will say that doing these EVFs side by side, the A7C Mark II is better. It's bigger. It doesn't feel like you're looking down a tunnel. It's brighter. Even though you can adjust the brightness of both of these EVFs in the menus, this A7C II does trump the RX100 Mark VII, even though the specs on paper are very close. This A7C II, somehow they managed to make it look bigger, better, closer to the eyeball. So I will kind of backpedal on that from my 1-year view of the RX1 R2 and say that I was actually, I don't want to say impressed. I guess what I could say is that I was surprised by the reality of what the EVF in this A7C II actually is. However, there is a con side to that, and that is I still think obviously it could be better. To what I understand, I think they improved it slightly from the Mark I version, the normal A7C. However, I feel like it could have been better, right? Now, obviously, I know that that's going to jack up the price, but I'm just thinking of something like the A7S III, okay? I owned the A7S III for a few years. I was so blown away by the EVF on that camera that I did an entire video about it. I'll link that down below as well, because if you didn't know, the A7S III has the same exact EVF that the flagship A1 has. The only difference between the A7S III EVF and the A1 EVF is that the A1 EVF has a way higher refresh rate. That's literally the only difference. Other than that, they have the same exact resolution, the same exact magnification, and the funniest thing about that to me is that no one is using the A7S III for stills. It's only 12 megapixels. It's primarily for video because of the low light capabilities. We all know 99.1% of the people that are using the A7S III, buying the A7S III, are never going to use that high-end EVF. Let's just be real here. What I'm getting to here is, why couldn't we figure out to meet somewhere in the middle with this new hybrid video, also stills capable compact travel camera, the A7C Mark II? Couldn't we have something much better than what's on here, and something that's like a middle ground, halfway to what the A7S III has, considering the age of the A7S III at this point, right? Now, again, I know that's going to boost the price of this. Maybe it's going to boost the size a little bit for something that is supposed to be Sony's answer to the ultra hybrid camera here. Even though some would argue that that's what the A7 IV is, I think that the A7C II is the ultimate hybrid camera, mainly because of its size, its portability, its compactness. So I guess that's where you have to, make a compromise, is the little shitty EVF that's in these cameras. Again, it's not as shitty as I thought it was going to be, but it still is a little bit of a letdown. But here's the thing, I use it all the time. It's the only way that I do photos. I never do photos with the screen. Coming from the Leica world, analog photography world, I don't believe in chimping. It's not enjoyable to me. So look, it's not so bad that I can't use it. I specifically feel bad for the A7CR users. That is the more photography-based camera, given the way higher megapixel count. I think that was the point, right? Like the A7C II is supposed to be like the hybrid, and then the A7CR is primarily pushed towards photographers. I feel so bad for them because they have this same stinky EVF. Not a great photography experience, in my opinion. The other kind of downside of it is the diopter switch. There's this little wheel here, and it gets moved all the time. That's what I kind of enjoy about the Leica Q cameras, is you're able to like push that diopter adjuster in and out, which kind of locks it in place. That's not going to happen with this thing. It does get jostled. It does move. It is a little annoying. Another kind of con tying in with this whole, is this for video users, is it for photography users, is the screen. This screen, to me, is not a hybrid shooter screen. This screen is a video shooter screen. It's vloggy, you're vlogging, you're flipping it out. Video shooters like to do this. This is nice. This isn't for photographers, not in my opinion. I think the Mark III version should have the same screen that the A7R5 has. That screen, to me, is a true hybrid shooter screen. It does just a normal flip out tilt. It does a normal tilt that all photographers love because it's directly behind the lens. It makes sense. And then you can also do vloggy stuff or video stuff if that's what you prefer. Wouldn't that be awesome if a hybrid camera had that? I can't believe the A7 IV doesn't even have that. If your argument is the A7 IV is the perfect Sony hybrid camera, well then explain to me why that doesn't have the perfect hybrid LCD screen, because it doesn't. It has a video screen. I think we should start to see all hybrid cameras have that amazing screen that's on the A7R5. Now we're going to get into some more video-centric cons, is the S&Q mode. Look, it's cool that we can do 4K S&Q and still get it at a true 422 10-bit. I was talking about this recently in a couple live streams ago. See, you got to check those because we talk about a lot of stuff in those live streams. But I find it amusing that so many cameras nowadays are coming out and they're claiming to be 10-bit, and yet it's only 420. And some guys in the stream were like, oh, kind of making fun of me because I'm throwing shade at that. But guys, let's be real with ourselves. 10-bit is not that great either, right? That's the reality of it. Real cameras, real true cinema cameras are 12-bit, right? So yeah, it's nice that we're getting away from 8-bit with our smaller compact mirrorless cameras, but 10-bit still isn't anywhere near 12-bit. Keep that in mind. And now imagine, okay, you have 10-bit, but it's not even 422 10-bit, it's 420 10. And it's like, you get a little bit, but then we're going to take a little bit back, right? It's not that great, right? So the fact that we can actually get a true 422 10-bit with 4K 60 in this camera is awesome. Let's just admit that right now. The biggest downside, though, in my opinion, besides the crop, because yes, you will get an APS-C crop in 4K 60 S&Q with this camera. A lot of people find that as a con. I don't really care about that. I'm not shooting a lot of slow-mo, okay? I primarily live in the narrative world. It doesn't bother me too bad that it has a Super 35 crop. It is annoying, but it's not like, oh, I hate that. What I hate more is that when you go to S&Q 4K 60, you can't get the highest codec out of this camera. That to me is way bigger of a downfall than the Super 35 crop. And what I mean by that is the highest codec out of this camera would be XAVC-SI. You can't do that at all in S&Q mode. You have to drop down to the next lowest codec, which is XAVC-S. Not the end of the world, because again, at least you can still go in there and make it a 42210-bit. It's just something that I think is a little bit of a bummer, and we're going to tie that in with my next con, is that I think the reason why you can't get the all-intra codec is because the one card slot they give you is just a normal SD card slot. Now, okay, it's not normal. You can use V90s in it, but obviously V90 is not high enough. It's not fast enough to give us XAVC-SI at 4K 60. Maybe in the Mark III version, if we're still only going to have one card slot, why not make it a CF Express card slot, right? Give us a CF Express slot in here if you're only going to give us one card, and now it will be a more hybrid capable camera. Again, I know people are yelling at the screen, yelling at me in the comments. That's what the A7 IV is. But I'm just saying, I really do think with all the competition going on right now, that this is the future of Sony cameras. I really do. These kind of perfect amalgamation, a perfect combo of their boring world of those A7 IV cameras combined with, you know, something like the A6700, the A6000 series. They have combined those two worlds, and they have really come up with what I think should be the new future of Sony's hybrid cameras. This is just my opinion, because if you're talking about a true hybrid camera, you have to look at all of your competitors nowadays. People that do street, people that do just photography in general more as a sidecar, they don't want to take some big massive camera around with them if all they're doing is documentary photography, street photography. They want something small like this. And why do I say that? Well, why do you think the Leica Q cameras are so popular? Why do you think the Fuji X100 series are so popular? I understand all the reasons why they're popular, but it's also about the compactness, the portability. You can just slide it when you're a real street shooter and a real documentary shooter, guy that brings his camera to everywhere he goes, parties. You know, I'm talking about like non-wedding guys, like non-professional photographers, right? Just guys that just love and enjoy photography for photography. They don't want to carry around some big bulky ass camera. They want something small that they can either hang around their neck and it's not going to break their neck. They want something they can hide behind their jacket and they can just walk into anywhere with it. This is what I'm getting to. This is the future of hybrid cameras. You can love it or hate it, but that's the reality. That's the way I see it. If I'm correct on this, and if Sony really wants to lean into that and be a solid competitor for those cameras like what Leica is doing and what Fujifilm is doing, then I think this is their way to go. And so we need to figure out how to make it more handy for both the occasional hobbyist documentary street photographer who is also a video guy. This isn't the craziest thing to think about, right? Because the X100V went so viral because of TikTokers, right? So that right there should be evidence alone. This is what Sony should be leaning into. Obviously, they are doing that with this A7C II and the A7CR, but I just think they are slightly missing the mark here on some of those things that could really make this thing go above and beyond than what any other camera company is doing. And the funny thing about it is that Sony could easily make all these implementations. It might make the camera a slight bigger. It might make it way more expensive. I don't think anyone would balk against having a better EVF, a badass screen on this, a faster card that can give you the highest codec possible. No one's going to complain about that. All it's going to do is fly off the shelves because it has all of Sony's amazing bells and whistles to truly make this thing a force to be reckoned with. It only has a micro HDMI. Look, it's not the end of the world. I know micro HDMI sucks, but it's not the end of the world. One little note I will say about this, it threw us off on the Pilot, is when I threw this on the gimbal, because, you know, it's primarily going to be my gimbal cam alongside the FX6 as the A cam. And when we first hooked the micro HDMI up to the wireless transmitter, the LCD turned off. And on the day, no one knew enough about these cameras yet, including me, which is my fault because it's my camera. But just a heads note, if that happens to you, you can go into the settings and all you got to do is turn the HDMI display to off. And then your LCD screen will come back on and you can still send a signal out via HDMI. So I don't know why it comes default out of the box with turning that LCD screen off as soon as you connect an HDMI cable. That's a weird thing that it does that. My last con about this camera is the electronic front curtain shutter. I absolutely hate it. The main reason I hate it is because of it just has the most disgusting sound to me. Now, again, I know I've been spoiled by shooting with the Leica M10 for over a year. You don't get that beautiful. To me, the M10 has one of the best shutter noises ever. Here's a bonus of having kind of this weird hybrid, half electronic, half mechanical shutter, is that you can go in complete silent mode with this, which is kind of cool. You know, if you ever find yourself in a situation like, you know, shooting behind the scenes or, you know, just anywhere where you want to be super ultra discreet. Maybe you're at a church or something like that. So that's kind of a bonus that you get with that. You can completely turn it off. Again, this goes back to another pro, is that with that comes the ability to, you know, put in the variable shutter rate, taps into the fact that it knows it's an electronic shutter, and then it will make sure that it's not going to capture at some heinous frame rate and give you a shitty picture with all the banding and everything. So it does have the ability in here in the menus. And basically, I've made it part of my function menu. You can go in here and turn on your variable shutter. You can turn that on and you can put it into anti-flicker mode. So that's cool that they've thought ahead on that. This last little thing I saved for last because a lot of people that I see online, they make it a con, but to me, it's not really a con. And so a lot of people complain about the size of the little grip on this camera, right? It's quite nubby, certainly if you've ever seen it side by side with something like the A6700. Because before I switched to the A7C Mark II, I was looking very, very long and hard at the A6700. That camera does have a lot of awesome video capabilities as well, but ultimately for me, it came down to I chose this because of the full frame. I just could not fathom going back to Super 35. The whole time I was shooting on the FX30, I could not wait to get back to full frame. You know, it's just one of those things, man. But yes, the A6700 grip is substantially bigger than this one, but here's why I don't mind it to me. Again, coming from the Leica world, M8, M10, M3, M6, I'm used to camera, even the RX1 RII being a Sony camera, I'm used to those cameras not having a side grip. I kind of prefer it, to be honest. Again, what I talked about earlier, sliding it into your coat or whatever, I kind of do prefer it. Because this is more of a true hybrid camera, I think it's the perfect size, honestly, right? It's not too big, it's not too small, not for me. You can just throw this little accessory on here. You know, you got this little small rig accessory. I really like this. The guy that I got this camera from, he threw this in. What I love about the small rig one is it has the little tool built in. So there you go. So you could get a little bit more height. You know, everyone's been, you know, look, I'm not going to get into all the accessories and things. You all know about the accessories with this camera. What I will say is that the guy that I got this from, he threw in all kinds of accessories. He had a little thing to like a viewfinder eye cup. I absolutely hated that. It just it actually made the EVF worse, in my opinion, harder to see. So I don't use that. He had the little wannabe thumbs up. I don't know. I don't use that either. And the only time I use this Arca Swiss bottom plate is when I need to go onto tripod. If I'm going to take this thing out try to go do street or something, I take this off. I have not been able yet to do true street for this, even though I've had it for almost a month. I know that's shame on me, but I've been just primarily shooting a lot of black and white film, so I just haven't really been bothering shooting street digitally. You know, I did do a video that literally tanked immediately, but if you're interested in it, I did compare some Tech Art autofocus adapters on this camera and compared it to some adapters that I much prefer for when using my Leica M mount glass on this camera. But you'll have to go watch that video to see that. I don't feel bad about this replacing my Leica M10 because it's just a much more capable camera. I put it to work immediately. My Leica M10 was a shit show trying to scan film with that thing. You know, it obviously can't do video. It certainly can't do live streams or anything like that. You know, it doesn't even have an HDMI port or anything like that. So the M10 is a one-trick pony. So for someone like me, it does make more sense, especially when I already prefer shooting analog M's anyways. I put this thing to work immediately. We use it all weekend on the Pilot. It's been a great little B cam alongside the FX6. Not really ideal, right? I mean, obviously, if I was a very wealthy man, you know, you would just get an FX3 as the perfect B cam, obviously for the FX6. But when you want something that is a little bit more capable beyond videos, such as photos, right? At least you get a somewhat decent EVF in higher megapixels. It's been a very capable camera. The biggest downside of all Sony cameras is they're not inspiring to pick up and use. I mean, you just look at it, you know, and all of Sony cameras are like that, right? It's kind of their biggest flaw, their biggest downside. I was saying in a live stream, I think what would be really cool for Sony to do as just like a one-off is kind of get into this retro trend that all the other cameras are doing, like the Nikon with the ZF. Fujifilm's been doing it for many, many years. Olympus is doing it. Like, why doesn't Sony make a retro camera and, you know, throw an homage to Minolta, the camera company that they bought out, right? Where they literally got the Alpha logo from. That was originally a Minolta logo. So why don't they make a retro Sony camera that is fully decked out with Minolta Sony insignia? Man, that thing would do awesome. I really do think it would, especially because of all the TikTokers and just all the trends and things going on around retro cameras and digi cameras and all the BS. That would be exciting to see. And I mean, honestly, I admit I probably would buy it, right? The retro cameras are cool. The Nikon ZF has my full attention. But at the end of the day, this thing does have, I think, more capable video features beyond what the Nikon ZF is capable of. Do I recommend this camera? Yeah, I do. I recommend it. Do I care if you buy it or not? No, I don't. But I hope that you found my honest opinions helpful in your own research of what camera you're looking for as your ultimate hybrid camera. I do think right now this is a solid contender for true definition hybrid camera, right? In terms of the kind of photography that I do, street documentary, and the type of video work I do, which is professional narrative video work. So anyways, take that as you may. Thanks for checking it out. Please hit the like button on your way out. And if you're not subscribed yet, maybe you should do that as well so you can start joining the live streams. Not that you have to be subscribed to the live streams, but if you are subscribed, you will get the notification bell when I go live. And don't forget, guys, we have awesome new merch here. The Dog Times American as Apple Pie hoodie. Absolutely love this hoodie. There'll be links to all that stuff down below. It all goes to support the channel. And the biggest shout out to the Dog Times Patreon group. Patreon is the bloodline to this channel. Just cannot give enough thanks and praise to all of the members on the Patreon group. So go check that out as well. Thank you all. We'll see you in the next one.